Welcome aboard the Athletics Can't Wait Jets podcast, your nonstop shop for all things Jets with Tim McMaster, Zack Rosenblatt, and Marissa Dunn.
Can't wait. Can you believe this? That is insanity.
If there's ever a play that embodies an entire season, this is it for the New York Jets.
That sums it up. Black Friday lives up to all the pregame jokes for the Jets. A dismal day in the Meadowlands. Thanks for joining the Can't Wait podcast. I'm sorry that we have to talk about the Jets, although we were maybe not going to do that later in the week. We'll get to that. I'm Tim McMaster along with Zack Rosenblatt, our Jets reporter at The Athletic. Thanks for checking us out. We're continuing our holiday push for 5-star reviews. Say something nice or funny. It doesn't even have to be nice. It could just be something funny as long as it has a 5-star review with it. We're going to read the best of the reviews at the end of the year. On today's episode, is Robert Saleh on the hot seat? We'll talk about that. What do you do with this offense now that you've changed the quarterback with no changes? Aaron Rodgers' potential return to practice soon. But, Zach, we might as well start with the play that I think, barring a miraculous turnaround to the 2023 Jets season, we're going to look back on that Hail Mary pick six, kind of like the butt fumble, right? The butt fumble was Thanksgiving, and it kind of encapsulated that season. And it feels like when we look back on this season, if it continues to go the way it's going, we're going to think of the pick six Hail Mary for many years to come.
Yeah, it does feel like one of those, just because it's such a unique, like, it's one of those things where when I even think about it, I'm like, I almost can't believe that, as far as we know, I haven't seen anybody bring up it happening ever before. And I saw ESPN stats only go back to a certain year for, I think, like 2007 or something, for when they started tracking Hail Marys. That has not happened. And again, it's just like, as Kirk Herbstreit said on there, it's like the picture of the Jets season. It's kind of the picture of the Jets in general. I also think about the zero blitz that Greg Williams did that got him fired a couple years ago is like one of those moments, like, what just happened? You just did a zero blitz and had nobody in the secondary, and they and yeah, it's just one of those like lasting images of the Jets that it's just like it kind of felt like they had some momentum. It was 10-6, and they had 2 back-to-back interceptions off Tua. And that happens. And then at that moment, it was like, okay, this game's over now. Like, it wasn't in that moment the game's over. In the moment, it was like, what the heck did I just watch? Like, everybody in the press box, I'm sure people watching at home. I mean, I think Marissa was the first one to text our group, like, oh my God, what just happened? And I couldn't, as it was happening, you can kind of feel that it was about to happen just because of the way when he intercepted it, there was just nobody anywhere. Like, Tyler Conklin was a little too out of reach to tackle him. Carter Warren gave very low effort on his tackle attempt, and then there was like nothing for a while. And then he pretty easily dodged all the offensive linemen who were down there. There were no skill position guys because they were all in the end zone. Garrett Wilson tried running all the way across the field, didn't get there in time. Tim Boyle had some bad tackling for him, but ultimately, like, just absolutely insane. Like I've said this multiple times now. Every week, the Jets do some shit that we've never seen before, and I guess I have to keep saying it because I've legitimately never seen that before. I thought the center thing where they played Xavier Newman at center and a few weeks ago would be the weirdest thing we saw this year. But yeah, here we are. We talked about if it was as bad as it went, we would stop talking about the Jets, and we had a lot of requests for that when I tweeted out that we were talking today. Somebody's like, I can't bear to listen to this. No, please don't torture me anymore. Like all this stuff like that. We're not going to stop talking about the Jets altogether on this podcast, but we're going to try and find some fun ways to talk about them.
It felt like, because honestly, it's not great for the numbers. The Jets season right now, not great for the numbers. But anyway,
I mean, but to the point of everybody acting like we celebrate when they lose, we don't. We point out when they lose, and it's like, but we don't.
I want this team to win so badly, Zach.
I'm making it as a statement of fact right here for everybody listening. I do not want the Jets to lose. It is better for me, selfishly, if they win. Like, it is not good for me if they lose. There's dysfunction and there's stuff to write about, but like, people aren't interested in reading, especially Jets fans who have been dealing with the same thing every year. Like, I know, like, I get it, but I also have to cover what's happening, and what's happening is they are bad. So
I was going to say about that play, that one Hail Mary play, it felt like watching it, and this happens, I think, on some interceptions, but usually somebody gets in the way. Felt like everybody just assumed there's no way he'll run it all. You know what I mean? Like there wasn't the full, like 100%. I have to go tackle this guy right now early on in the play. And then there's a big opening and suddenly there's blockers in front. And then it was too late. It was just,
and just to go into halftime like that, and Salah was the one who did the halftime interview. It was like the worst timing because that had just happened, and he was like so flustered. Understandably, like I don't blame him for that part of it. He's and he's like he kept saying it's unfortunate because that's all he could muster. Like it's just, it was just like such a quintessential. I can't even. I'm very curious. They will never share this footage. I know they film a lot of stuff for their One Jets drive, but can't imagine what the locker room was like after that. I would say, and I haven't really heard any stories, so maybe I'm sure it was a lot of silence and confusion.
I think it was quiet. I bet it was quiet.
Yeah. It was probably quiet. And it just goes back to the defense again. Like they're running out of steam. Like these last 2 games, the second halves have been pretty bad. But to that point, they were playing remarkably well. They forced 2 straight interceptions, like I said, and it was like all for naught. So, it's just like that was just like the picture of the Jet season, and we're gonna get into this. Like I've covered teams where weird stuff like that happens, and the coach and the staff does not survive like that big of a disaster, like being like the image, like just something like that, like so ridiculous. Like I covered the Joe Judge Giants where he was a lock to come back. Like everybody's saying he was a lock to come back for a 3rd year. Then first after a Bears loss, he has a 15-minute long rant about how great things are and how he has players begging him to come back and play for him and all this insane stuff. So that put him on watch. And then in the last game of the season, he kneeled the ball from his own 10-yard line to give up on a play and punt it. And from that moment on, he was toast. And I don't think that we're gonna get into it again, but I don't think this staff is toast for reasons that are obvious and not obvious. But it just wasn't a good look all around because they just didn't look like they knew what to do. And part of the reason is a lot of those guys are young guys who are not playing, and the Jets can use that as an excuse, but you are the ones that chose to play them in week 12. You're the ones who decided this is the path you're going to go, and they were not prepared for these moments. So it's on the coaching staff and it's on the players again, the effort wasn't there on that play. Like, I think that's obvious.
All right, let's talk about the offense, which the quarterback changed. The offense was no better. In fact, crazy that a week ago against the Bills, the offense had 155 yards. And then on Friday, 159 yards. So incredibly similar. Boyle, 27 of 38, 179, 2 interceptions. The completion percentage is probably better than you'd get from Zach Wilson, but that's about it. I think at one point he was like 7 of 10 for 28 yards or something like that. The yards per attempt was around 2 or something like that. It was just not pretty. He'll get another start this week because I don't know who else you would give the ball to. You can't go back to Zach Wilson. I don't think it makes sense to go to Trevor Siemian. So he's going to get another chance at it. But when you think of this offense changing the quarterback, getting the same results, it makes me think, and I think everybody else thinks, Zach, that the quarterback's not good, but it's not the problem necessarily. There's something deeper here.
Yeah. And I'd say Jets Twitter is slowly becoming very, I don't know if toxic the right word, but there's a lot of negative energy right now. And it was the other day, literally anytime anything bad happened, my mentions were flooded with, oh, well, I guess we can't, I guess that was Zach's fault too. I guess that was Zach's fault too. I guess that was Zach Wilson's fault too. Or I guess maybe we should bench Tim Boyle or whatever. I think people are missing the point of just because Tim Boyle is not very good does not mean that absolves Zach of all the problems he was having. Right. They had to bench him for reasons even beyond his performance to a degree because it had gotten so bad that the locker room was going to fracture if they didn't make a change. So, Taylor says toxic's the right word. Look, Tim Boyle, you hope they would come out and they would do something different, and they did not. And if anything, they went more conservative with Tim, which was the opposite of what I thought would happen. I thought we would see what we saw with LaFleur both years, where when Zach Wilson was out, he opened up his playbook. Nathaniel Hackett did not open up any playbook. I don't even know what their playbook looks like or if they have one. Brian Costello from the New York Post had a savage tweet where he said maybe Nathaniel Hackett should be calling plays from the parking lot next because there's a lot was made about how he's in the press box now. Like Tim Boyle averaged 4.4 yards per air attempt. Like he didn't even throw 5 yards every time he passed the ball. Like that's wild. And I don't think he threw it over 10 yards either at all, or it's like only a couple times he did. And he threw the ball 38 times. Like that's, for a team that was trailing as much as they were, that's just wild. And I know he didn't have a lot of time to throw because he was getting pressured quite a bit. Although he still averaged 2.35 seconds according to True Media, which is very fast. It was just he missed a throw early that was really bad. He threw it over Jeremy Ruckert's head when he was open in the flat. He had a couple interceptions, which were not good. I didn't think he was like out of this world terrible. Like Tim Boyle is not going to like win you any games. Like that's the reality of it. And if the Jets are falling behind, then they're in trouble anyway. But especially with Tim Boyle, I get rolling with him another week. If he's bad, then maybe you switch to Trevor Siemian. They're not going to switch to Zach Wilson. We'll have to get into the Aaron Rodgers of it all. But if Tim Boyle is a quarterback and they're not going to even let him do anything, like it just goes back to the same thing, that the issue they have with Zach. Like they're so scared to do anything that this is the worst offense in the league. What are you scared of? Like do something creative, like do some end arounds, do some trick plays, play action, throw it down the field. Like they just do the most boring, bland offense. It's the same like every play, every week. And it's just the play calling. It just makes no sense to me. Even when guys are open, like the thought process behind the play calling just doesn't make so much sense to me. And there's like the running game hasn't been great lately, which we'll get into a little bit with the Breece discussion. But my issue is more still with like the game plan than the quarterback. And again, I don't think they're going to win many games with Tim Boyle. But are they going to win any games with Tim Boyle if they keep playing this way? I don't know that they will.
Yeah, and Salah was asked after the game about Hackett and if he'd consider changing him, what the answer was there. He said it would be a really long answer for another day. To me, it translates to I'm not going to take away play calling because of Aaron Rodgers and our hope that we get this thing figured out with him. But like at this point, Zach, at 4-7, unless you run the table, all is probably lost here on the season. And even if the miracle occurs of Aaron Rodgers coming back, it's not happening for a few weeks. So the season will be lost. I just I don't buy that excuse anymore. Like you don't have to take away his offensive coordinator position. You just need someone else picking these plays at this point just to see what happens. I mean, and we've talked about it before, like you go back to Green Bay and Aaron Rodgers. Nathaniel Hackett did not call the plays when he won those 2 MVPs. He was the offensive coordinator. So what's wrong with trying that?
I mean, you're not wrong. I 100% agree. I mean, as you know, I think Todd Downing is a logical guy, and you don't need to, like you said, you don't need to fire Hackett. You can change the structure of the play calling or whatever it is. Like make Todd Downing make the final call, whatever you have to do, or Salah get more involved. Like I don't know what it looks like. It's pretty clear to me, and nobody will admit this publicly or maybe even privately because I think they're scared of anything but getting back to Aaron. But like ultimately, Rodgers thinks his offense works with Hackett, but the part that Aaron leaves out when he feels that way is that it's because he's the one running it. When Aaron Rodgers is running this offense, he's the offensive coordinator. And in Green Bay, he was not. He was like, even when Hackett was the OC there, it was still more of a split between LaFleur and Aaron Rodgers than it was between LaFleur and Hackett. Hackett, when he was there, he like focused on the situational stuff in the red zone. He was not calling plays at all. And as I've written in it,
the gold zone.
Yeah, the gold. Sorry. Yeah. I know fans could not be more tired of hearing that. And by the way, Hackett had some pretty brutal answers this last week in his press conference where he just said like so many words and said absolutely nothing. Like somebody asked him about like Tim Boyle's numbers not being great, and he had this line and it kind of went viral-ish where he said something along the lines of, there's some good players that have good stats, and then there's some who don't have good stats, and it was like just a lot of mumbo jumbo word salad nonsense, and it did not go over well, especially when we saw what happened again on Friday. But yeah, I don't think they're going to fire Hackett. If they want Aaron Rodgers to come back, I do not see that happening. I think Rodgers clearly has eyes and sees how bad it's been, but I think a lot of the organization feels like the quarterback position is more the issue than the play calling, and I disagree. But Aaron Rodgers obviously changes things just because Hackett is then not really the play caller anymore. Like he is technically, and he's on the headset, but the odds of Aaron running the plays that Hackett is calling when he's in there are pretty slim, I would say.
All right, should we take a break? We're going to come back. We'll talk about, it's already been chatter in the discussion today about Robert Saleh in the hot seat. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about the Lazard situation, what's going on there, and a little bit more about Rodgers as well. But we are excited to have a new sponsor here on the Can't Wait podcast, Omaha Steaks. The holidays are here, so let Omaha Steaks take the guesswork out of the gifting. Shop carefully curated gift packages that are guaranteed to make spirits bright all winter long. And you can save 50% off site-wide, and you can get an extra $30 off your order by using the promo code WAIT at checkout. $30 off the great deals that they're already having. Zach, I've had this delivered. You've had it delivered. I haven't gotten into mine yet. I've been traveling so much. I actually haven't been able to open the freezer and cook up some of these great meats, but you have. So fill in everybody about the great stuff you've been eating.
Yeah, so I was surprised because one day Samantha texted me. I think I was traveling back from one of the road trips, and she's like, "Did you order steaks?" I'm like, "I have no idea what you're talking about." And there was a photo of this big box of steaks, and so we got like all these different things. So far, they gave us top sirloin that we've made, and a couple of steak burgers, and they have like these frozen like scalloped potato things, and there are these like apple tartlets that we had, and just going down the line, like the steaks were juicy and flavorful even after I froze them and cooked them. Like just very tasty and flavorful and easy to cook. You go on the Omaha website, they have recipes for you, so it even like takes a lot of the guesswork out for you. And the burgers were really thick and again juicy and just like really flavorful, and the potatoes were fantastic. So I've never actually had anything from Omaha Steaks before this, but I genuinely was like blown away by how tasty it was. Especially, you never know what kind of quality you're going to get when you order like steaks like shipped to you, and you have it after you freeze it for a few days, and then you defrost it, and then you eat it. And I think sometimes you can lose some flavor, but I genuinely did not lose any of the flavor. And I highly recommend you guys take advantage of this deal because it was awesome.
Yeah, it's not just the steaks, like you mentioned, burgers, bacon wrapped sirloin,
Yeah.
also the apple tartlets, some dessert in there, the scalloped potato, gratin potatoes, everything. You have a whole meal. They have seafood as well. So whether you're gifting it to somebody else or just order it for yourself with this deal, just get your own Omaha Steaks. This deal is from the heart, a gift that will be remembered with every unforgettable bite. Order with complete confidence today, knowing that you're ordering the very best. Go to omahasteaks.com to take advantage of 50% off site-wide, plus use promo code WAIT at checkout to get an extra $30 off. You're already saving 50%. Get another $30 off of that. Minimum order may be required. We are excited to talk to you about Omaha Steaks. Probably more so than we are to talk to you about the New York Jets right now. Let's get back to it, though.
Yeah, Brian Sternbeck said, describe the steaks for the rest of the episode. Let's talk about the Jets another time.
We'll do 30 minutes on the steak.
All
right, let's get back to this team and where we're at right now. Let's talk about Lazard, and then we'll get into the hot seat. Obviously, this is one that goes more to Joe Douglas, and this just everything that happened in the offseason that we felt pretty good about has just gone awry. And now Allen Lazard, a healthy scratch on Friday against the Dolphins, $44 million deal, and undrafted free agents were active, 2 of them, but not Allen Lazard. Is it a 1-week message send by Robert Saleh, Zach? Where are we with Lazard?
Boy Green alluded to what he said after the game about him. I just want to read the quote because it was very interesting, especially like the specific context of it. He said, obviously my decision, there are things that we all need to get better at, including him. He's going to be here for the next year and a half. I'm going to get back to that in a second. He's going to be a part of this. Just wanted to make sure on that one. I wanted to get some of the young guys an opportunity to play. And 2, it's kind of a challenge to see if he can recapture the edge and who he is and the person that we have a lot of faith in. He's a good football player. I do believe that for Allen. He'll be back sooner than later. Then somebody followed up like, are you saying that he lost his edge? And he said, no, edge is probably the wrong word. Sorry. I'll speak for him. He hasn't been playing up to his standard. Everyone is pressing on the side of the ball to make something happen. There are parts of his game that need to be better. I think Saleh does speak emotionally, and so I imagine he might have meant when he said in that initial quote about the edge. But I mean, the part about his contract, like I literally like turned to Brian Costello, and we both like had a hard time not laughing because Allen Lazard signed a 4-year contract, and Saleh was like, he has another year and a half here before we cut him. Essentially,
means they've already done the math. Yep.
I mean, in Saleh's defense, which he probably shouldn't have like said specifics like that publicly, but like these contracts are never as long as they say they are. Like if like it's a 3-year deal, it's actually a 2. If it's a 4, it's usually a 3 or a 2. Allen Lazard, they can get out of after 2 years. They can't get out of it this offseason. They will not save money on it. I don't have the numbers in front of me. I can pull them up. But anyway, like it's funny. I heard in the day or two leading up to the game that there was going to be a surprise inactive, and my gut said Lazard because I didn't really know who else would have been a surprise necessarily that we didn't already know was going to be an inactive, but I couldn't bring myself to like actually believe it because it seems so ridiculous that we've gotten to that point. But he's been very bad. I've seen some people say he might go down as a worse free agent signing than Tremaine Johnson, which is saying a lot because that was really, really bad one. But I mean, there's a case to be made because we're within his first season of his contract and he's already a healthy scratch. Like that's how bad it's gotten. They made him the highest paid wide receiver in free agency this offseason. He's when they signed him, the way they pitched it internally, publicly and to a degree, or privately and to a degree publicly, was that he was going to be like a better version of Corey Davis. And now I hear from people and they're like, well, you can't criticize us because Corey Davis isn't here. Like the personnel is a mess, and we lost Corey Davis, and I've heard that from multiple people in the building. So Lazard has not worked out in a way that I don't think anybody expected. I think there's a part of the thought that he'd be better with Aaron Rodgers, but you're paying him to be good regardless of who's playing quarterback. You don't pay a guy that much money to just be good with one quarterback. And he was going to be here beyond when Rodgers was here in theory when they signed him. So it just has been an absolute disaster. Ultimately, obviously, they signed him for Rodgers. And I think we're seeing that Aaron Rodgers, the GM, is maybe not as good as Aaron Rodgers, the player. And the biggest mistake the Jets made this offseason and Joe Douglas made is that he went all in on what Aaron wanted. Outside of the draft where they didn't draft a weapon in the first round, I can't imagine Rodgers was happy with that in retrospect or maybe even in the moment. But yeah, I think this is a real big black mark on Joe Douglas's resume. And if you look at free agency, in terms of like pure, like unrestricted free agents, not guys he's claimed on waivers, what cheaters are credit for. Like there hasn't been a lot of like home runs outside of DJ Reed. There's been a lot of guys that didn't make it to the end of their contract, and which is common, but Carl Lawson's a healthy scratch every week, and when he's out there, you don't notice him. And Corey Davis retired, which you can't blame them for, but he was injured a lot his first 2 years. And Laken Tomlinson, he's kind of evened out, and he's been their only healthy lineman this year. But Lazard ultimately is his worst signing. That or Ryan Khalil. I wasn't here for that, so I don't really have as much emotional attachment to what happened there. But yeah, I mean, it's like I would never, in my wildest dreams, could not have imagined it going this poorly for him. He has the worst drop rate of anybody in the NFL. I think in terms of receivers that have run like 300 routes, he's like third to last in receiving yards. Like he doesn't get separation. He's supposed to be a great run blocker. I haven't really noticed him doing much as a run blocker either. So he hasn't really brought any value. If anything, he's been a negative when he's been out there. So now you have them playing Jason Brownlee ahead of him. And Brownlee has like 3 career catches at this point. And they had to activate Randall Cobb because they had needed somebody to be on the active roster at receiver. And Cobb's been the least productive receiver in the league. Especially because he played this game and didn't have any catches again. So, yeah, just the Green Bay group, the guys he asked for. Dalvin Cook, to his credit, was starting to play better, but they're just not playing him at all. He's getting 1 carry a game now, so he might as well not be on the team. And it's just a disaster. Like the personnel is absolutely an issue, and that's the result of Joe Douglas's doing. I think they've had bad luck on the offensive line, which I don't think you can entirely blame them for, but the weapons, you absolutely can blame Joe Douglas for the route he went this offseason. Especially, you're watching last night and Zay Flowers is getting open all over the field and he scores 2 touchdowns. And JSN had like a one-handed catch on Thanksgiving, I believe. Jordan Addison's been very good for the Vikings. Those are 3 guys they could have had, and they chose to draft Will McDonald, who, again, I think he's going to be a good player, but this is a team that was in win-now mode and they drafted a project. So it was a bad offseason for Joe Douglas, especially – obviously they were banking on Rodgers, and that was his big move. And if Rodgers had worked out, then he might have won Executive of the Year. Instead, Rodgers got hurt, and the rest of his moves stick out like a sore thumb.
You mentioned what Salah said about Lazard. He also talked about Breece Hall this week and calling him out to a degree. He supposedly has taken it well, but there's the grimy yards that a back has to understand that he needs to get. He's a big back. He's 220 pounds and he's got elite speed, but he also has the elite ability to lower his shoulder and get vertical when he needs to. And once he reconnects to that, I think it'll all come back and we'll start to see what we know he is. That's about as negative a comment as you get from Robert Saleh, right? Always positive all the time, Robert Saleh, and he called out his running back.
It was surprising, and it caught me off guard because we saw for weeks him just not want to say anything bad about Zach Wilson. And maybe there's a part of it where he's less worried about how Breece will take criticism than maybe he was worried about how Zach would take it. But it was unexpected, and it clearly was something he wanted to get off his chest because he offered that up. Like he was just asked a question about how Breece had been struggling, and he went into detail about how he needs to get the tougher yards. Which, to a degree, it's hard to argue with it. I also think the run blocking's been an absolute disaster. And the defense knows he's going to run it every time, so they can scheme up for it. Like, Breece definitely hasn't been, hitting the hole as hard. And I do think everybody should remember, and Breece hasn't really been criticized, so I don't even know if I need to tell everybody to remember this, because he's been one of their only saving graces this season when they've actually scored points. But remember, this is the first year coming off ACL. Like I covered Saquon the first year after his ACL, and it was kind of like this. He would have some games where it was intriguing, but he was kind of avoiding contact. Not saying Breece is avoiding contact, but he was avoiding contact and didn't hit the holes with that same explosion. And then it was the year after that where he started looking like the Saquon from before that. And I imagine we might be on a similar trajectory. I think everybody's expectations maybe got a little out of whack, including my own, when we saw what he was doing in the beginning of the season. They can still break free for some of those yards. He's been a much better pass catcher. So I don't disagree necessarily with all the criticism, but I was just surprised that he said it publicly. And Breece came back with a tweet saying about how constructive criticism is good or whatever. I don't know. I am curious how that was those comments were taken in the locker room, just because of the Zach Wilson part of it that I mentioned. And Salah going out of his way to kind of criticize Alan Lazard too. Like, it's definitely not something Salah has done in the past. So I'm curious to see how this plays, and I'm curious to see what it does for Breece. But ultimately, he needs to play better. I think that's undeniable. Breece was pretty hard on himself after the game. He admitted that he was pressing. He's never pressed in his career where he feels like he has to hit a home run every play because the offense has been so bad. And Garrett has said the same thing. And it's kind of indicative of an overall problem right now, because Salah has talked about, and he said this a while back in regards to Zach, not trying to win the game himself. Like, he said how he never wants his coaches to tell players to go and make a play. He doesn't want them to play outside of themselves to press and try and make something happen. And that's what they're doing. And so obviously it's natural from the press when things have been as bad as they are. But I think there's coaching involved here too, where they need to get them to stop feeling like they need to press, and they need to call plays to put them in position to just succeed, where they don't have to play outside of themselves.
So as far as Salah goes, now when you look at the hopes of a playoff, I guess they're technically still alive, but they would basically have to run the table or only lose one more game the rest of the way. But then you have Aaron Rodgers waiting in the wings, maybe this season, if not next season. He came to this team partially because of this coaching staff. So how is the seat underneath Robert Saleh right now?
Man, I've been asked this question in a lot of different forms lately. Yeah, it's complicated. I wouldn't say it's a cold seat, for sure. It's just so complicated because of the Rodgers factor ultimately. And so that's why it's hard to answer, because I really think that internally they believe everybody is safe. I think they all believe that the Aaron Rodgers thing threw everything off. I don't think they responded the right way that they needed to from Rodgers getting hurt, Douglas-wise, and not getting a quarterback, as we've talked about. But they're in a really tough spot now because they don't have a quarterback, and their weapons that they signed are not very good, and all this stuff. And usually, of course, there's an alarm going off outside my window. God, that's so annoying. But so really distracting me.
Power through, Zach. Power through it.
I'm trying. This is finally okay. We're good. All right. So, as I was saying before, Robert Saleh started putting on the car alarm outside my window. It's pretty rare that a coach makes it to a fourth year with the resume that Salah has, and without any real evidence of them making progress overall. Their defense has been a lot better, but we're about to experience another second half collapse, like 2 years in a row, with guys that they drafted, guys that they signed. And so I think if he's not worried, I think there should be some concern, because I know that Woody Johnson is an impatient owner, and they were the only show in town on Friday. They were the only game on TV, and they were an absolute embarrassment for the most part offensively. And statistically, they're doing things that no offense has ever done in a bad way. And so I can't imagine that Woody is okay with the product that's being put on this field right now. And so if we get to the end of the season and they're absolutely collapsing, and you hope that Salah avoids Joe Judge's meltdown, but if they get to the end of the season, Aaron Rodgers still says he's coming back, I think everybody's safe. But I also think Rodgers wields more power than maybe almost any player in the league, because if he came out and said, I'm not coming back with this head coach, then Woody would probably listen to him. If he came back and said, I'm not coming back without this head coach, that would absolutely secure Salah's job. That's why I think Hackett is still safe, and Douglas is an interesting one. But yeah, ultimately, if I'm predicting, I think everybody comes back, but I don't think it's 100% sure. That's the best I can give you.
And those aren't the reasons you're looking for to have your head coach coming back at all. It's not what you want. I think the other thing, right, is how the season does finish out. Because if the team quits on him, that's another thing into the equation too, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And so Rodgers being in the building now, which I think he's supposed to be this week. I guess we'll probably get into that.
Yeah, let's transition right into that. He's in the building. Will he be on the field for practice? According to Rappaport over the weekend, he said, I think, late this week or next week, Rodgers would practice. Yeah,
I'm highly skeptical he'll practice this week. I can't imagine anybody's clearing him to go on the practice field yet, but him being around the building is positive. Anybody who listens to this knows, I'm skeptical that he'll actually come back this season, and especially as they keep playing this way and you look at the supporting cast, like, I can't imagine Rodgers wants to come back to this, and it seems like he does. And I'm sure we'll hear from him tomorrow about it some more. But, yeah, I don't know. I'm curious to see if the mood changes with him being there, how his teammates feel about, like, kind of the sideshow that it's turned into, where every 10 seconds they're being either asked about him or everybody's being told that he's there or that he might come back and this and that and this and that. Whenever he is in the building, I hope we get to talk to him at the podium soon, because we haven't really done that. I know he talks a lot on McAfee, but we do have a lot of questions. So, and he's usually good about answering them. So hopefully we get to talk to him pretty soon, but I don't see him practicing this week. Maybe he gets on the practice field and, like, maybe they activate the practice window next week. Like, I don't know. That pure guesswork for me. I don't know anything for sure. I do know that everybody, both internally and even externally, does have a real belief that he's going to come back this season. But do I believe it? I still am skeptical. I can't see a doctor clearing him. And I just don't get why the team or him would want to risk everything for that. Because if he goes out there again and gets hurt again, like, is he going to be motivated to want to come back from that again? Like, I don't know. And I don't know if that's worth it.
And what you just said, the coaching staff, like, I mean, if he came back and got hurt again and was done, that's probably it for the coaching staff too. So they have reason for him not to come back, in a sense. Like, that sounds terrible, but I don't know.
Yeah,
that's a cynical view for sure.
I think the idea is if he comes back, you get a couple games with him in the offense, and they can kind of show what it would have been. But there's also a chance it's a disaster. So it's not worth the risk. If everybody knows that they're safe for next year, I'd say just kick back to next year. Let him come back to practice. I don't think there's any issue with that. But bringing him out on game day, I don't see it.
He turns 40 on Saturday. I don't know if coming back and practicing on your birthday is, like, something that he would be shooting for, or if he'd rather not have to practice on his birthday. Not sure, but that's, the big 4-0 looming on Saturday. Will Aaron Rodgers be on the practice field or not? It's going to be interesting. Does he give? I don't know. Does Aaron Rodgers practicing give this team a mental lift?
I don't know. Honestly, I would have said yes, like, a month ago, but I'm not as certain anymore, is what I would say. They're in such a tough spot right now, and I think the mood is definitely dour right now. I don't know how much confidence this group has in their offense. And they have confidence in themselves, and they have some players who are good, but, like, they have they've been giving themselves and they've given the fans no reason to believe this team's going to get better. So I don't know what Rodgers being in practice does outside of, unless you're letting him be really involved in the plays you're calling even more. I don't know. It's going to be something I'm going to be tracking both publicly and like privately, like talking to sources and stuff as this happens, because I don't know what this looks like. I do wonder how the players feel about the constant, like, especially as they're struggling, and how you have to constantly deal with, number one, all the attention he gets every Sunday with all the reports coming out, and then he goes on Tuesday and he criticizes how they played or talks about how they played, and then they have to respond to things he said, and it's just like a nonstop cycle. And I can't imagine everybody's loving it, is what I would say.
And that's what we knew we were getting. And I think the Jets knew they were signing up for that, right? Like when you make that deal to bring Aaron Rodgers, you know what he is. You know that he likes to get the attention, to be on camera. You saw it in Hard Knocks, plenty of it. He took over Hard Knocks for sure. He's always done his McAfee thing. And now, unfortunately, because he's not even playing, it's more of an issue. If he's playing every Sunday and then he's staying stuff on Tuesday, it's insightful. But if he's just doing what he's doing now, I would think it would grind on teammates a little bit.
Yeah. If they were winning, then it might be okay, but they're not. And everybody's kind of miserable right now. So, I mean, I'm curious to see what he says tomorrow, because they've reached a low point of their season. He's generally stayed positive, I feel like, though he has like offered some like specific football-based criticisms. So I'm very curious to see what he says if he comes out and defends Hackett again, all that stuff, defends Tim Boyle, and I mean, the biggest thing is going to be whatever he says about his recovery. But I'm curious to see what the show looks like tomorrow and how it resonates in the locker room. Which, we're going from Friday to Wednesday not being in the locker room because of the way the schedule. The last time we were in the locker room was on Wednesday. Like, it'll be a full week since we've been in there with these guys outside of the post game. So curious to see what the vibe's going to be this week.
Yeah, and we're going to come back at you later this week. We have something a little different we're trying to work on to plan, because we know everybody's tired of just talking about this football team on the field. So it should be fun. Still a work in progress, but we'll have more information as we get closer to it. But Zach, I think the last thing everyone tuning into this show wants to hear right now is a full breakdown of how the Jets match up with the Atlanta Falcons. The first place Atlanta Falcons.
Oh my God. Yeah. I don't know if anybody could have less interest in such a topic than our listeners, but the Falcons are leading their division, though they only technically have one more win than the Jets. So maybe the problem with the Jets have is that they're not in the NFC South, is what I would say. But yeah, I mean, the Falcons have a great running game, which has been the Jets' biggest issue. So if you're looking for pure football stuff, like, that's something I have my eye on. And on the flip side, I think the Falcons defense has had some flashes of being okay, but the Jets offense has had a habit of making bad defense look good anyway. So I don't have a lot of confidence. The Jets are underdogs at home against a bad Falcons team, which kind of says it all. It's going to be another ugly, boring game. So tune in.
All right. It's going to be an interesting week. We will be back with you either Thursday or Friday. We'll keep you updated on social media and here on the YouTube channel. Thanks to everyone for tuning in and getting through another episode of the Can't Wait podcast here as we try to see what happens with this team as we inch to the finish line.